Welcome to Technically Edinburgh, the podcast for and about technicians at the University of Edinburgh. My name is Charli Corcoran, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Cammie Walker. Cammie is a technician at the Institute for Education, Teaching and Leadership within the Moray House School of Education and Sport. With a background in physics and a wide-ranging role that spans everything from outdoor education to classroom experiments, Cammie brings a unique perspective to technical work in an education-focused environment. He's also finding time to pursue a master's in wildlife and conservation management, and I'm very much looking forward to finding out about Cammie's role here at the University of Edinburgh. Welcome to the podcast, Cammie. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me.
To start us off then, can you tell us what your current role is at the university?
So, my current role at the university is I'm a technician at Moray House, as you quite succinctly put. So, I work across the entire campus within the whole of the Holyrood campus. So, I mainly work within the Chartered Land, working on the PGDE programs, but I'm not limited to specifically working on those. So, I've worked on things helping with outdoor ed. I've occasionally had to go across the road and help things in the sports science, but that's much rarer. So, I'm mainly based in Chartered Land, helping on the PGDE programs, mainly within the physics and within primary education. But again, I am sometimes, depending on availability of different people, I'm sometimes brought in to do different tasks.
That sounds super varied. PGDE, that's Postgraduate Diploma of Education, is that right?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's people coming in after they've done their undergraduate and then learning to teach.
Yeah, so the majority of our students are actually primary-based students. So a lot of my work is working with primary students, working in setting up what's known as technology labs and the primary science. So what that involves is kind of making classes for the technologies and primary science, which can be massively varied in terms of what they have. It just depends on both what's within the current curriculum within Scottish education and within what the individual tutors are wanting to kind of achieve within their classes.
So I imagine that's incredibly varied then. Do you have a typical kind of day or week you could talk us through, or is it just whatever's going on whenever it's going on?
I kind of have two types of typical days depending on the time of year. So I have the typical day when students are in and the typical day when students are away. So the students have a placement that they go on. Mm-hmm. So they have 3 placements throughout the year. At different sections. So when the students are in, I'm mainly setting up experiments, setting up labs, setting up rooms to do kind of classes, and I'm kind of making sure we've got all the resources ready for them and kind of sourcing any parts that we need to get within. In that kind of time frame, I'm mainly kind of working as succinctly as I can because it's a quite tight turnaround a lot of the time between the different classes. So that's mainly what I do when students are in, but when students are out, it's everything else. So there's less timelines, but there's more kind of general work to do. So it's like the maintenance, the repairing, the ordering, the finding out what our timetables are going to be like, finding out if there's any fluctuations within student numbers, basically getting the information so that when the students are in, I'm not having to kind of worry about, I can just do the work. Mm-hmm. So basically, when the students are in, I am doing the actual setup, making sure all the things are out. And when the students are out, it's all the kind of initial prep. So making sure everything's ready so I'm not having to worry when they're here. That
sounds nice. It's nice that you have that kind of, not downtime, but no student time to get prepared and get organized. You're not having to do everything at once.
Yeah, it's a nice kind of duality where the times that the students are in, people might think is usually the busiest, but in some ways it's the easiest because there's a set, timetable we're working with. So it's very much, this has to be done by this time. Meanwhile, when the students are in, there's everything else, which can vary from, as I say, maintenance to restock to disposal to all these kind of things that take up more time than a lot of the actual prep might actually take. So yeah, it is nice to have that kind of duality to it.
Is it easy to stay adaptable? It sounds like you cover a lot of different subject areas. Is it tending to be, one day you'll focus on one subject area and then the next day you move on to a different one, or is there a lot of things going on at one time?
So I would say the thing for me is that it's never usually one subject that takes up all of my time. It's usually as an example I could give is that, if I have a primary technology workshop, and I also have a physics workshop. Generally, what it'll be is that I will get the physics workshop set up and then move on to the primary, because usually I don't have a lot of time when the classes are actually in. There's usually not a large amount of crossover, so it's a lot of doing everything together, and then when things come back to me in the downtime is usually when I actually have the ability to separate the two and kind of concentrate mostly on one and mostly on another. But when the students are in, it's very much do it as quickly as you can,
go,
making sure that everything's
okay. So you have to be able to go from one kind of physics to technology to the next subject to the next subject. It's not.
Yeah. It's a very much a process of being able to be very, and usually it's going in with the open mind that the tutors that run the courses don't always have necessarily what they want initially, so they'll give out an initial list of things that they're wanting for the class. We'll provide it, and then 9 times out of 10 there'll be something that needs to be added, or there's additional stuff that they don't need. So it's very much a process of being very adaptable and kind of keeping an open mind in terms of if a class is in, being able to quickly make some quick changes to a class depending on what tutor's in, what the specific class we're actually doing is. So it's all about the adaptability.
This might be a silly question from me not quite understanding. When you're setting these experiments up, are these your students doing the experiments being taught how to teach the class?
So the thing that is difficult to kind of understand is that what we usually get. So I'll take physics as physics and primary as the two examples.
Love examples, please. Yeah.
So for the physics students, you might think, they're physics students, they've come in, they've done lots of experience, but they can have wide-ranging of abilities in terms of actual practical. So if you've got somebody that specialism is theoretical physics, they might never have done the same primary experiments that they are like first year of high school, just because it's not been in their specialism, and they've not done it in some cases 15, 20 years. So it's basically reacclimatizing to experiments. And basically the level in which we're dealing with experiments goes everything from kind of first year of secondary school all the way up to kind of first year of university level.
Okay.
So there's this huge range of, the risks with the kind of, early secondary is much lower than that of the, early university level. So it's all about the getting students used to that, range of things that they'll have to teach in a classroom, and so that when they come in to actually teach, they aren't ever worried about, what does this equipment do? What does this do? It's basically my job most of the time, and it's mostly concentrated around the kind of start of them starting, which for our students is in August. It's getting them into that frame of mind of not being worried about, what does this equipment do? What does that do? And then at the very start, it's very prescriptive. Here's your equipment. This is how it's set up. This is how it needs to be. And as it goes on, it becomes more and more of a process of them, rather than me setting it up completely. It becomes a process of them just being given equipment and going, right, here's your list. You're in a secondary school. You need to make this experiment. This is what you'll be provided. Make it work. So it's that kind of getting them used to that kind of frame. So at the start, it's very much due to their backgrounds being so kind of wildly different. You can have people that are so used to it and like bang, 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 easy peasy. And then you get others that might struggle a bit more. So it's just getting them all at that kind of level so they're feeling comfortable.
Right. That's so interesting. I think that's not something I've ever thought of before. Like teachers coming in, having to, the experimental side of teaching science or teaching technology might be quite daunting for people coming in. It's nice. It's lovely to know that they've, got you there to keep everyone calm and okay. And these equipment can be daunting. So what are some of the more unusual creative setups that, is it normally always the same thing, or do you get to do lots of different setups? And
so it's a really good question. So it depends on, first of all, the tutor that's taking the courses. So they have the kind of the final say on what's being done. But within that, one of the kind of ones that is kind of to me is one of the standouts is from this year is we had a primary science class that had snails involved. So it was all about the sourcing of garden snails, and we had to keep garden snails for a week, and then we had to send them back out into the wild safely. And it was finding out all about what safe release is. So in terms of classes, the secondary is kind of very much within kind of what you'd expect. The experiments that you kind of would do at a high school level, it's very kind of, these are things that need to meet certain outcomes.
Yeah.
So they'll be designed around that. But the primary can be anything. So we've had everything from states of matter where we've had to freeze balloons to, as I say, the snails, having to learn how to keep snails for a few weeks. And it's that kind of thing of that you don't really know what's good. So we kind of know in advance kind of what kind of things, but knowing in advance is only kind of half the battle.
Yeah.
It's also making sure everything's set up and done in a safe way so that we are prepared. And that's again when it come back to the kind of on and off times. It's that, because we have roughly between 100 to 125 primary students on average, it's having enough so that you have enough for each class. So between 4 and 5 classrooms worth of snails.
That's a lot of snails, yeah.
It's a lot of snails. That was definitely a more unusual setup is having enclosures made and finding snails, especially in kind of late September, early October when there's not as many snails.
I assume there's not a snail breeder out there that you can get them from. Did you have to go and find them?
So that's one of the things that I within this role that I've kind of had to learn a lot is because we're dealing with a lot of primary stuff. A lot of it is source yourself, but source in. So we do a lot of like recycling stuff. So you can't really buy rubbish, and you can't And most of the snail things we were finding were like giant snails and like ones that were, and we were only having these snails for 2-3 weeks, and then we were putting them back out. So the whole point of it was that we weren't keeping them, and we didn't want to buy hundreds of snails to then have some sort of ecological disaster happening.
That's so
but
cool.
Yeah, it's very much that kind of thing of a lot of normal channels to get things don't usually work because a lot of things that we're wanting are things that people usually throw away. So packaging is one of the things that we use quite a lot of in like technologies to make things, because it's what primary teachers will actually end up using. So they're kind of acclimatized to that environment.
That's very different from, say, a technician in a university lab where they're sourcing, all the right grade material, where you've got to think about what could a primary teacher get hold of easily from their kids or and schools that don't have a massive budget these days. So that's so cool. Okay. How long have you been in your role?
So I started in August 23, so just under 2 years.
Okay. And what was your route into your role? I know you'd said your background is physics. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you go from physics to this role?
So I would say it's been a very mixed and varied route. So my initial training is actually as a lifeguard. So
cool.
I did quite a lot of health and safety training and kind of things alongside that. So that's how I kind of got my basis in kind of a lot of the safety procedures and standard operating procedures and all the kind of normal things that you go through. And when I finished university doing physics at Heriot-Watt, I initially got an internship with a research company working on making things more user-friendly. So that was something that I'd never done before, and was something I enjoyed, but due to the fact it was an internship, it wasn't a permanent position. So about halfway through the internship, it was supposed to be a 6-month, and it ended up being a 3-month. And then from that, I got the job as a technician, the physics technician at Heriot-Watt, where I was both the teaching technician and the kind of a bolt-on research technician. So I was mainly working within the undergraduate and postgraduate labs, doing setups and acquiring parts and doing all the kind of sourcing for them, and occasionally doing a bit of research, but not that much. It was mainly focused on the kind of undergraduate labs, which was good. I did that for 2 years, and 2 years almost to the exact date. But one of the things that I was finding was, whilst I was in that role, I also did a postgraduate certificate in education, in just general education through the Open University. So I kind of got into that kind of sphere of things there, as well as the fact that my fiance is a primary teacher.
Okay.
So I kind of got into that kind of sphere. So when the role came up here, it kind of allowed me to see new opportunities outside of necessarily straight physics, which is kind of what I'd been doing for the past kind of 4 to 6 years, if you include the undergraduate stuff. So it kind of got me in that sphere of kind of that kind of thing. So when the opportunity came up, it seemed like a great thing. And when I was interviewing, I got to have a tour around the rooms, and it just seemed like a great opportunity. So since then, it's just been a kind of enjoyable experience.
That's good. I was just going to say, are you enjoying it?
Absolutely. I think the big thing for me is how varied it is, going from everything from, writing up the kind of more bread and butter, writing up risk assessments, things that you can do in almost any kind of technical role, to the more weird and wonderful, like sourcing snails. So yeah, it's no 2 days are exactly the same, but there's usually a framework to work from.
That's good. It's good to have goals to keep yourself on track. Like, I have to write a to-do list, otherwise I just wander off. I had a question in my mind then, and it's completely gone. I got too excited about to-do lists. So you were working as a physics technician.
Yes.
And from what sound of what you were saying, you're setting up experiments and helping in teaching labs and things like that. It sounds quite similar to some of the things you do now. So has that translated quite well in terms of like the skills you got from doing that and being able to apply them into the role that you're in now?
Yeah. So I think that the thing is that my frame of reference before was setting up experiments and doing kind of lab work, but the kind of the bottom end of what I was doing before is now the top end of what I'm doing now. So there is straight correlation between a lot of the work, but there's a lot more kind of fundamental work that I have to do. So meanwhile, before there's an assumed level of knowledge. So that especially when you're doing kind of third year undergraduate labs, they've been there for 3 years. They're doing the work. They kind of have an assumed level of knowledge. So they get kind of slightly more dangerous. There's slightly more high quality equipment required. And, there's that kind of correlation between, you need to spend a bit more money to show the more difficult experiments.
Right.
But there's also more associative risks. But that kind of does give me a good framework from when I moved to the role here. It's allowed me to kind of see things from a more and it's just especially interesting because a lot of the people that I work with, especially the physics graduates, are mainly who have come through the university. Depending on their background, as I say, they can have wildly different ability levels when it comes to experimental work. So it's really interesting hearing what their experience was and how they interact with people, in terms of like technical staff and things like that, depending on the institute they were in before. So it's a really interesting kind of correlation between the two, where I can kind of see both sides of things. I can see how they've interacted with technical staff on their way through university, and now I can see what it is once they finish, and now they're going on to further their education in the PGDE course. So yeah, it's been a really useful thing seeing how people interact, and so I can kind of mirror in a similar way how they would have experienced it as an undergrad.
It's nice to have that background experience to bring to this role. How have you found collaborating with staff and students? It sounds like you're quite involved with the students and the tutors.
It's a difficult one to really explain. So we are both directly and indirectly involved. We are mostly indirectly involved with the students. So quite often it will be, especially if we have any of these kind of larger setups, we will be working in kind of classes where they might be running over 2 hours to 4 hours, depending on the thing. So what it'll be is that we'll set it up, we'll get everything ready, everything will be out, and then usually if it's one of these longer sessions, we might have to come in maybe halfway through, so when they're on their lunch break. So well, that's usually when interactions between students happen. Is when we're in between things, or we're setting something up and the students in. So we aren't ever in the delivery of any of the courses, but we are directly involved when it comes to like if they have any problems or if they're acquiring things. So even within my specific team, the way that we interact is different as well. So the way in which our design and tech technician interacts is completely different from the way that the science technicians interact, because he's more of a hands-on, involved in the labs,
Right.
while we are more of a indirect kind of voice from the shadows.
Okay, I like that way of describing that, voice from the shadows. Is there an opportunity for you to be more involved with the students if that was something that you wanted to do, or is it very much like, no, actually, we are the voice from the shadows?
So it's an interesting question, because in total way of viewing it, I would say that it's all dependent on who the lead technician is. Oh, not lead technician, the lead tutor is, who's taking a course, because the way in which they want to deliver the course is very changes depending on who it is and the way that they want to interact with the students. So some are very much, they want the students to speak to us, to ask us problems, to act as this kind of intermediate force between they're feeling worried about speaking to a tutor, they might come to us. But others want, just a straight, you do this, we do that. So it really depends on who the course lead is and how they want, things to work. So even within our own team, there's wildly different ways that different tutors have opinions on. So not to say that there's not going to be opportunities in the future. Staff changes, the way courses are running, curriculum changes, that all changes the way in which we interact with the students. So and especially when it comes to things to do with risks and risk assessment, we are heavily involved with making sure that the tutors are aware. So indirectly, again, how the students interact with that kind of stuff.
Okay. And does the curriculum change that often?
Yes and no. So things that influence is politics and scientific discovery. So politics is just basically who's in charge of the Scottish government. Well, that can change how they want to interact, and we are heavily influenced, and by heavily influenced, I mean directly influenced by what SQA say. So, if there's a change to what they want in the curriculum, then we make an associative change. So if they say this isn't in anymore, then we don't do that, and if this is in, then we do that. So it's dependent on that. And scientific discovery. So one of the things that was added in the past kind of 10 years was standard model, which was not part of the curriculum at all before, and now it is one of the points that is actually in curriculum. So it's one of these things that if there's major scientific changes, then that usually changes and influences curriculum. But if the thing that mainly changes it is kind of what we hear from the SQA.
Yeah, that's what I always think about when Pluto was no longer a planet, and how that must have affected everyone involved in like teaching about the planets. And I imagine that happens not all the time, but relatively regularly. Something changes, and you have to think about how it is portrayed to the students and the teachers. And
and I think it's one of these things that generally changes aren't really made unless there's overwhelming scientific discovery, but a lot of things are still brought up. So for example, one of the big things that happened in the kind of past 10-15 years was gravitational waves, which was discovered and then wasn't discovered and then was proved and then disproved. So, and to some things like that, which there was some scientific consensus, isn't usually added until there's but things like when the Higgs boson came, that then meant that they could add things like the standard model in to standard curriculum. So it really just depends on kind of what the kind of changes are, and if there's small changes, something has a reclassification or that kind of thing, generally doesn't have a major impact on the kind of learning outcomes or curriculum. But things that are like seismic changes within the scientific field, that can usually have an influence in terms of what we have to deliver.
Okay. Well, that's cool. So we've talked a lot about adaptability, but is there any other, or maybe just adaptability, that's a huge skill, but what skills have been most valuable to you in your role, and the demand, like dealing with the demands of the roles and how varied it is?
So I think that the main one, I think the start, middle, and end of the kind of thing is communication is the one that I think is by far the most important, because the adaptability is I would say probably number two, and it's really important to be able to do this, to do that. But I think the communication, both with tutors, with other members of the technical team, in terms of being able to explain your workload, saying what you've been given, so that if people are asking for additional help, it's so that they are aware of your workload. So if you can help with something, you can offer it. But I think it's the ability to say no if the needs arise, so that you're never going to burn out or worry about putting too much on your plate.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
And I think that for me is the most important, so that everyone is aware of the challenges that are going to possibly come up. And I think the other thing is that goes alongside that is kind of time management and aware of the kind of what your workloads are. So especially when students are in, it's kind of so everyone has it noted down what we all have and what classes we all have. So within our team, there are specialists within. So I'm the physics. There's also a chemistry and a biologist, who all have their own specialism. So we all work on things like primary, so the things with that. But within our own specialism, we mainly just concentrate on that. So unless there's something happening that's like a cross one, or we are requiring equipment from other department within our own department, but other sections of the same department. That makes sense. So, for example, if I need to use glassware, for example, I don't have a stock of glassware within physics, but chemistry do. So, if that's the case, I would then go to them and say, "Oh, can I borrow some glassware?" And they usually would provide that, no problem. But I think the other thing, as I say, is time management, so that you aren't ever going to double book yourself, even if it's months and months and months in advance. You're able to block up the time in a way that means you can work through different tasks.
That's such a good point. There's no point in being adaptable if you aren't communicating about it and you don't have time for it. So, there's a great, and that's good. You take that as kind of like some advice for people if they're thinking about, what skills to concentrate on and work on. Those are great skills that are useful in all roles. You're currently talking of time management. You're working on your master's in wildlife and conservation management. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Really cool. And you also did your PGD when you were in your previous job as well, PGCE.
PGCE. So it was the 60 credit course in education.
So how have you found studying alongside working?
I've found it an interesting experience. So some of the things are directly like they can go hand in hand. So especially when I was doing the education course, there's things that I can then whenever we're doing setups, that I can let my own opinion about certain things come through, even if it's not going to ever come to anything. I can come from a point of mild education on certain points, even if it's not my direct field. I can say X, Y, and Z on different matters. But I think the thing that I found most interesting is that I can see from both sides of the curtain as well. So I can see how things are being run and how things work, but I can also see from a student perspective. So I can see what difficulties are coming up, why the way that things might be communicated, how things could be communicated in a way that that they might not understand. So that it's allowing me to see both sides of the curtain. And within the course I'm doing right now, so the wildlife and conservation management, that it's not a direct one like add-on for my current work, but what it allows me to do is there are aspects of it that influence, especially when I'm doing outdoor education, I should say. It allows me to see how things again are being run across both sides of things. So how it's being run from a tutor side of things, and how it's being run from a a pupil side of things.
And are you looking to use that master's to do anything in the future?
Unclear at the moment.
Unclear. That's fair. Yeah.
So the main reason I started was I have an interest in kind of outdoor and kind of outdoor education and outdoor pursuit type things. So it was something more of a personal
interest.
Yeah, a personal interest.
Yeah.
But it does allow me to as well help interact with some of the biology aspects. But it was more for a personal development and for additional kind of for my own learning rather than anything directly related to my role. But it does allow me to look at, if I'm ever looking at further roles, it allows me to see options that maybe are slightly wider than what I'm currently able to look at in terms of roles. So it basically just was mainly as a personal development type thing. But
it sounds really interesting.
It's been a really interesting experience, both from a kind of the course content side of things and an assessment type of things. So so it's allowed me to kind of see things in new ways, and the way that there's no usual way of assessing things, so it's all done in a style of employability. So it allows me to see different parts of it that might be interesting to both include in our current course and things that might not be applicable at all. So it's been a really interesting experience kind of going through that, and especially when it's something I've been interested in for a long time, but I've never done any kind of formal kind of qualification or any work in it. So it's been a very interesting experience.
I'm glad. It's good. If nothing else, it's good that it's been interesting, and it sounds like it's been really valuable to have that experience and to be able to look at it from your the student's perspective as well as the technician perspective.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing as well is that it's allowed me to kind of see what might be like from our side of things in terms of technical team things that might be worth adding, things that might be worth taking away. If things aren't explained clearly, so looking at documentation that the tutors can provide to go alongside things. So it's been as I say, an invaluable experience, having that kind of ability of seeing what might be common gripes that might be missed just because students might not say to a tutor. So it's allowed me to see what people's opinions are, and it's just been a really interesting experience to do that. But it has brought not challenges, but it has been a kind of management of time, even more so, to making sure that I can get all the assessments done in a way that doesn't affect my work. So it's been a really interesting experience.
That's fantastic. Now, while we finish up, it's been really wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for coming along. We try to ask all of our guests if they have any advice for anyone who might be interested in doing a similar role to them or getting involved in something you've done in the past. So do you have any advice to pass on to anyone interested?
I think it really depends. So if it depends on the type of tech, I think looking at what the requirements for a technical role, I think, can really influence. So in my previous role, it was really important to have lab skills down, and making sure that I was good at communicating points, and working well with people, I think, is one of the key things. So working in that sense is something that I think is an invaluable thing to have, is to be able to communicate things. But I think the thing that I found from this current role is to kind of not have your expectations set early on, and to kind of allow the role to develop alongside you and see what things might change, and to never be kind of fixed into one place, and to ever be too worried that things might be changing, to just see where a role goes, and to be allow it to be seen if a role isn't initially what you think it's going to be in terms of the way it's described, to just keep looking at things related to that, because sometimes it can be not exactly laid out initially what are the requirements. So it's always just kind of reading the undertones of what people might be looking for.
That's great. Thank you. It's brilliant advice. And thank you so much for your time this morning and for coming on and talking to us about your role. I've had a great time listening to what you do. It sounds really fun.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Technically Edinburgh. As always, please like and
follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. As you know, we will be changing our name to Technically Scotland in the coming months. So make sure and follow us on our new LinkedIn account, Technically Scotland Podcast, so that you don't miss us when we move. A huge thank you to our guest Cammie, and of course to you, our listeners, and we look forward to seeing you again in our next episode in February.